you're like me, you probably want to be the best version of yourself that you can be. But when I spoke to today's guest, Noel Woodward, I realized that maybe my view on reaching my potential is a little bit skewed. To be who I really am is perhaps not what I had imagined. Noel's been a friend of mine for quite some time, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this interview with you. It's been a long time coming, but here it is, that interview with Noel Woodward. Noel, thanks for agreeing to be on the podcast. We've known each other for a while, so I might have an idea of the answer to this question, but what do you find most fulfilling?
Yeah, good question, Tom. There's probably two things for me I find fulfilling. One's definitely like within my, I guess, my giftings would be helping other people and serving other people. That's definitely one area. And the other area where I find fulfilling is seeing others reach their potential and helping others reach their potential. And so, yeah, they're probably the two real things I find. Yeah, a sense of fulfillment and a sense of purpose.
Reaching people's potential, do you think that's a difficult thing to attain, to reach your potential?
I think depending on your expectation of what your goal is, like if your expectation is wanting to be the best, or is your expectation just trying and being on the journey of reaching your potential. So I think it's a lot easier just if you're just trying to reach your potential rather than doing the opposite.
Right. Have you had success, do you think, in that goal of helping people reach their potential?
I think I wouldn't say I've had success. I've had like been friends or had people in my life who I've seen, who have got that striving to reach their potential and learn from life. But I think, your influence on other people is not probably as great as what you think you can be. That's been my experience.
Really?
In life. Yeah.
So, but there is some element though where you can influence somebody, you'd say.
Yeah, it wouldn't be influence. I'd use the word encourage.
Encourage.
Yeah.
Yep. Do you think that's important? Could people reach their potential on their own?
Yeah, I think without encouragement, people can't reach their potential. I think influence, I find, is like more of your putting your expectations on that person. Where if you're encouraging that person to be to achieve their own goals, have their own experiences, I think that's a much fruitful outcome.
Right. You're a father. You have friends also that you care for quite a bit. How do you find it when you see them going on a path that you wouldn't consider the best path for them?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the perspective is, the perspective I have with that is you can't necessarily, as I said, I look at it as you can't necessarily influence or change people. It's more encourage people to encourage people in their endeavours. So in some respects, like you see it with kids a bit too, sometimes they need to know the boundaries. You need to let them take those steps to push the boundaries, to know the boundaries. So like you could say something is hot, don't touch, it's hot, don't touch, it's hot. If they normally they'll touch it, then they know it's hot through that experience. So I think you can't rob people of experience. So you have to let people have experiences. And and that's my perspective. And I'm sure people probably be like, why are you doing this now, or why are you doing that? Like, why are you making those choices? But it's kind of like, well, it's the experience that I'm having in life, or my previous experiences has led to this decision. So that's the way I look at it. If you can't shelter people, you can't control people. It's more of encouraging them through their experiences.
I'm thinking of a few people you've journeyed with, and it can be tough though, watching them go through things.
Yeah.
But do you think people can change?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think change. I'm going to go, no, people can't change.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have a unique core set of, not necessarily values, but a core set of what makes them thrive. I think that's innate in them. So I think like people can change their style, their looks, their jobs, their career, but that's not necessarily changing how they're wired. And like, because of my faith, the way that I believe they've been designed by God, the Creator. So I see, because of that, I see that people, can't necessarily change their core, but people can change their habits, their behaviours, their the way that they look. But deep down, they can't.
So you would believe then that people shouldn't change who they are. It's more of a growing into it, discovering who they are themselves and what they're meant to be doing, what they do best.
Exactly right. And so I look at very much so that we've been created uniquely, and part of our journey in life is to discover and use our uniqueness to show love to others and to make a positive impact on the world that we live in. So, and like how you do that for some people, like I find this myself, like I'll do certain things for certain periods of time and change different activities or different things that I do. But for other people, it might be they're called to a particular thing which they do for 50 years or something. Like I think of like long-term people that do like Salvation Army, Red Cross, like surf lifesaving. People have seen that, like some people can lock into that and be a part of that for a very long period of time. And and that's where they feel like that's where they're to be. Where for me, I've bounced around a lot of different experiences, but my heart of helping others has always stayed the same.
So you'd say that everybody, if they're living to their potential, should be using what they're good at to help others. It's not about achieving personal goals. Let's say there was someone who was very gifted at sport and they excelled, they're aiming for the Olympics, etc. What aspect of that do you see is they should go for that, but it's also an element of helping others?
That's a great lead-in, actually. There was a story I was going to share, which I think is getting in a little bit like being authentic to yourself. Is like, I know of this. It's really stuck with me, actually. There's a local runner that I know, and he is very competitive, wanting to like achieve as well as he can. And he was in a race, and I think he was battling it out for third place in a marathon. And he was real, and it was, as in most running events, the finish chute's always a deviation off the track. So the main course, you might be doing so many laps, and then the finishing chute's a deviation. And there was a person in front of, so this person I think was fourth, and the other person in front of them was third, and they battling it out throughout this marathon. And the person who was third didn't go down the finishing chute, kept going straight. And so this is right at the end of a marathon, so there's fatigue involved. You're not going to be making your best judgments. But this person who was true to himself, who was in fourth place, he stopped and sung out to the person who was third to come back and go in front of him and finish in third place. So that's an example of, you can see like that's where like a core value of himself overshines the stressful environment that person's in, to put his own values in front of success or perceived success.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah, I see that, and I'm like, that's something that, yeah, for me, I'm like, how do I, when I'm stressed, when I'm tired, when I'm fatigued, how can I make decisions and choices which are true to what I believe and who I am, versus the environment I find myself in, trying to compete and in those circumstances. So yeah, that story really stuck with me.
Because the sort of society we live in is set up for competition to some degree. We're competing for the best jobs, they're competing for, even simple as best car parks, or, there's a shortage in something, we're competing for that.
Yeah, like you look at it, like this is very time capsule, but like at the beginning of COVID, there was like panic buying. And it was like, I remember seeing people posting images with their collection of stuff which was hard to get hold of at the time. And it was kind of like a breaking point. And I was really disturbed by those images, because I have my perspective is more circular community, and the fact that like there should be enough for everyone, and we shouldn't be storing up for ourselves, for our own personal gain. And so it's quite interesting, as you said, like our society is wired up for that. Like as soon as there's something becomes slightly hard to get hold of, all of a sudden everyone's competing to get that item, even if you don't need it. But it's like a badge of honor, and it's kind of like, how do you? So that's the environment that we kind of live in, probably locally and probably to some respects nationally, in Australia. So it's kind of like, how do we then not let that prevent us from showing love to others, putting others first, when it's totally counterculture.
That's really interesting, Noel. And why is it so important for you that we do put others first, care for others, when life can be tough and we have our own needs to look after?
I think that's the exact reason, because life is tough. That's one of the things, and also it's it's a key value of my faith, is that Jesus put himself in a place where he bore the burden of sin for us. So I look at that like his whole life was for serving others. And so I look at that principle of, well, that's a value that I want to reflect. And that's a value that we're called to, that's within our DNA, that's a part of who we are. And I find, for me, I find it fulfilling, because it gives you purpose. It gives you're not necessarily focused on your inward problems as much, because you're thinking of others. And I think if you're thinking of others, expanding your thinking, I think it does help a lot to put your problems in perspective.
So you're saying it's in our DNA. So living to our potential would be finding a way to use our gifts to serve others.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And what about somebody that's in a tough situation, battling through something? Often in that situation, it can be quite a sort of withdrawn, sort of looking inward view. How is that a circumstance where you just got to battle through, or can somebody overcome that and still be looking out for others within that?
Isolation and loneliness is the toughest emotion, the toughest circumstance anyone can find themselves in. It's like a disconnection from other people or rejection from other people is probably the hardest circumstance anyone can find themselves in life. And so like anyone who's going through that, like I have so much sympathy towards those people. But in saying that, I think a perspective of that has to be, it's probably like a season. Treat it as a season, not a this is how things are meant to be. I think would be a key. I feel like, I think in those circumstances too. So I think there's a lot of with self-reflection. I say this to kids a fair bit is trying to help the kids not to get engrossed in their thoughts or isolated in their thoughts, is to actually be in the moment that's in front of them, and whatever that moment is. So if that moment is, having family over, that they're in that moment, they're not isolating themselves or retreating themselves. So that's probably one perspective I have with that. Another thing is, I think looking for is being in. If you're participating in community, people also participate in you. So I've always found, I think we've talked about this before, is if you're spending, if you're going somewhere new, engaging in the community things that are there, it helps to meet people, to find common values with people, and to have people help you and to help others. And like obviously, like with my faith, I participate in the church community. So there's if I move to a different town, I still can go to a church community to get that. But people can find that in all sorts of other things as well. But personally, for me, because of my faith and the community, I participate in the faith community. That's I get that encouragement and that belonging from there.
What are the signs of real community as opposed to?
I don't know. I think community is this beat up mystery word that I think there's too much expectation of. I think there's too much expectation of what community should be and what community should look like. So I think, to be honest, community could be like, I think community is organic and it can't be controlled. So you can put every system and structure and training course, you could go to the whole of it and still have no community. So I think with community is all it is people who are willing to receive and give. I think that's the fundamental key. And I think if you're able to gather people together who are prepared to receive and prepared to give, you've created community.
Yeah. So it's not so much aiming at community, it's a byproduct of people living sort of out of genuine care for each other.
And I think if you're a part of could be a family, friendship groups, whatever it is, if you're in a group with people who are prepared to receive help and prepared to give help, I think that naturally draws people in. People want to be a part of it.
Part of that would be being honest with each other, not trying to put on a facade of having it all together, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's so like that sort of emotional connection, I guess, it has to be authentic, and I think a lot of that comes down to, I mean, thinking about this a little bit, is I think confession's a big thing, and it's not. I know, like, this is a word that gets probably people jump to. You're in a room with priests confessing sins, but it's not necessarily confession of sins. It's more confession of how you feel. I think is probably a big thing, or like to the point of, oh, today I'm struggling because I've got pressures of work, rather than bottling that up or whatever. There's a confession of that's what's weighing on you. I think that's very important. So I think if you're able to, with being authentic to yourself through confessing what is going on emotionally, I think then that helps you and helps the community group thrive, because you're not letting your emotions. You have understood what your emotion is, rather than covering your emotion and then it rearing its head as a fit of rage or jealousy talk or whatever it may be. So that's what I find is quite important. And so, and like my confession could be just like me in a room to God, or it could be confessing it, and sometimes other times it's like confessing with my spouse, like, this is how I feel today, this is what's going on, this is what's chewing me up, and just confessing that, or sharing it with a friend or whatever, and that releases that that inner conflict that you're having, and gets you, as I was talking about previously, out of your head.
And so coming back to living out of your potential, that would be being authentic to who you are. And part of that is that we are broken, that we're not all, we don't have it all together. And so, in a way, living to your potential is not being, perfect.
No way. And I think that's part of the problem with society, or another subculture in our society, is having things together. And I don't think, like, if you're always perceiving to be perfect, I think at the end of the day the only person you're fooling is yourself, in many respects. So I think as you're like trying to reach your potential, there's going to be an element of it as that, like, there's going to be imperfection along the way. There's going to be times where you're not going to succeed. There's going to be times where mentally stuff is going to be harder some days than others. That's just a part of the experience. And I think it's learning from those experiences and not letting those experiences bind you by fear. Is probably get bound by fear because you haven't succeeded, or you haven't lived up to your own expectations. Because I think we're dancing around a bit too, this a bit, is I think sometimes the hardest judge of ourselves is ourselves. So I think sometimes, yeah, and that's where if you are, as I said, like giving and receiving in that community, you're receiving love, you're giving love. There's not as much. You're getting a antidote to the judgment that you put on yourself, because other people are telling you, "Oh, you're doing well, you're doing this."
Often it's perceived expectations that are a big trap for us too. That it's not people, as you say, are a lot kinder to us than we would be to ourselves. We go into places and we have this perceived expectation that others have that probably is not real.
That's interesting. I think of, different, like what would get me when I feel the most pressured. And it would be in environments where I feel like there's a perceived expectation of how I am to behave or how I am to interact and that sort of thing. And it's interesting, so it's kind of like, is it me that's created that perceived expectation, or is the perceived expectation actually there? And I think sometimes, it's a bit of a two-way street. Like there's could be a bit of both in most circumstances, but or in my experience, most circumstances there could be a bit of both. But sometimes I think wholly and solely it's just us.
How do you think those, when it's not us, what do you think creates that atmosphere of unsaid expectations?
I think sometimes it might be your previous experiences you've had with that person. Has created that. I think sometimes too I think sometimes if we get in an environment that we've a little bit like pinch ourselves, how do we get here or something like that, you sometimes might perceive that you might have to behave or interact in a way that's not your natural natural way of communicating. But I think sometimes it's just it's like in those circumstances it's just how do I engage and not withdraw. That's what I battle with, and that's what I'm always trying to get the balance right, is engaging in those situations and participating in a positive manner, not a negative manner, in a positive manner that has opportunities to grow the relationship or turn stuff around. So,
part of your outward-looking nature, Noel, I think you're quite a good judge of people, and you often have a high sensitivity for when people are not being real. Where do you think that comes from? Why is it so important for you that people are being real?
I don't think it's probably not important that people are real or not. I think what it is I think some of it is self-protection for me, to be honest, is protecting myself from being taken advantage of. I think some of that, so through experiences I've had, probably I have felt in the past that maybe some people have taken advantage of me. So then I'll probably see those tells and then go, oh, this situation's not right, or what this person's saying could put me in a compromised position, or this person's, so that could be, I think that's a lot of it. But for me personally, it's like, I think it's hard to be authentic to someone who doesn't reciprocate. So that's probably a lot of it, is if I feel like, and I'm sure a lot of people have this feeling like where you feel like if you're telling the truth and not hearing the truth back, or if you're giving wholeheartedly and the other people aren't giving wholeheartedly, a part of you just wants to disengage from that because out of protection. So that's probably what majority of it is. And as I said, like it's like people are, everyone's on their journey, everyone's going through their own experiences. So I don't think any less of those people. I think it's still you're trying to, like, they're on their journey, they're having their experiences. But sometimes I feel like for me there's some times where I have to disengage for my own protection. That's all it is. Sometimes.
You're quite a loyal person, Noel. You'll be very forgiving of people and willing to stick by them, not run away, even if those situations have happened where you've been hurt or they've not been real with you. What helps you to do a journey with people and not give up on them?
I think 100% is, for me, again, it's through my faith conviction. I look at, again, God hasn't given up on me, and I think of all the stuff I've done wrong. Who am I to give up on other people? So that's just fundamentally, I just see that as purely because of, through my faith, there's that is a value to that has been demonstrated throughout the Bible, which is my point of reference. So I see that as it's been demonstrated, it's something that I need to demonstrate to other people. Otherwise, what's the point? If I do if I give up on people, what's that demonstrating to other people? It's not demonstrating my faith at all.
No. Oh, that's very encouraging. I think that's a great attitude to have. Any final thoughts on this topic of people and how to bring the best out of them, how to bring the best out of ourselves?
I think the biggest thing is taking time, not rushing things. I think that's one lesson that has really stood out to me. Like, it takes time for it just, stuff takes longer than what we think. We're in a fast-paced society, but reality is for change to take place, for even stuff of value in our life takes time. So like if you look at, like, if we to study or go to school, like that takes many years to complete an education. You can't do it, and there's no quick fix to learn mathematics other than long practicing, understanding the concepts, and it takes a long period of time to get an understanding. So I think but once you understand mathematics, you can apply it to every part of your life. So I think you've got to, for me, that's the principle that I kind of look at. Things of value take time. And to understand people fully, or what drives people, takes time. So if you're looking for quick fixes in friendships or changing people, well, that's not going to
It's going to be
happen.
pretty fruitless.
So I always think stuff of worth, stuff of value takes time to obtain. So it's exactly the same thing with friendships and relationships and encouraging people. It's not a fad thing. It's something, or a 6-week course or anything like that. It's something that just takes many, many years. And there's, like, you're going to get hurt. That's going to be part of the experience some of the times with being journaling, like participating in other people's lives. They're going to do stuff that you're not necessarily going to agree with, but at the end of the day, you've got to look past, and a lot of it is exterior sort of stuff too, like they, you know, but it's not their core of who they are as a person. So sometimes you need to see past that. But in saying that, if it's a situation where it's physically harmful to be there, you've got to remove yourself from harm. But I'm not talking about harmful physical situations or harmful mental situations. Just talking about like more trivial stuff that people do, which you go, what are they doing that for? So I'm not talking about control. I'm talking more about just stuff that friends do.
Oh, it's good talking to you, Noel.
Oh, it's always good, Tom, for a chat.
Well, thank you so much, Noel, for sharing so honestly with us. Some great insights to chew over there, and I'm sure you would appreciate, like me, what Noel shared. If you have some thoughts on this topic, please share them in the comments. Always love reading what you have to say. Otherwise, got some exciting content like this coming up, where I speak to everyday people about their experiences, what they've learned through life. This is the Figuring Life Out Together podcast, and if you would like to share this content with somebody you think would be encouraged by it, that means a lot to me, and it's a great way to help our small but growing community continue. So thank you for listening. I hope that you can join us again next time, and please feel free to reach out if there's anything you would like to discuss. Perhaps you would be willing to be on this podcast sometime. Thank you, and see you next time.